On this episode of The Spirit Stories, we are investigating the Mountain Meadows Massacre, a tragic series of attacks resulting in the mass slaughter of 120 immigrants from the Baker-Fancher Party on September 11, 1857. When I was a very young child, I realized I could feel, hear, and see things that others could not. Paranormal phenomena is occurring all around us as spirits are interacting with us in our human realm. My name is Kalena'alo Adams, and I am an intuitive medium. My quest is to bring an understanding for myself and for others as to what it is that spirits are trying to communicate to us. Join me as I interact with spirit and gather information so that I can share with you the spirit stories. The Baker-Fancher Party, mostly families, was one of the wealthiest wagon trains to travel west, consisting of over 40 wagons, around 1,000 head of cattle, plus valuable goods and money. The wagon train was migrating to California along the California Old Spanish Trail from Arkansas and Missouri. After 3 months of travel, they reached Salt Lake City, Utah, where they planned to restock and rest. Before the Baker-Fancher Party arrived in Salt Lake City, tensions in the Mormon community were high. Apostle Parley P. Pratt had been murdered in Arkansas, and the Baker-Fancher Party was unaware of how angry the Mormon leader Brigham Young was towards anyone from Arkansas.
So there was a missionary who was one of the last people to stay in Arkansas, and a few weeks before they received word that he had been murdered by his then wife's former husband, who had helped in kicking them out. And so
his name was?
Last name was Pratt, and I do not remember the first name.
Okay.
But they felt that these people from Arkansas were representative of that group, and apparently they'd also picked up some people along the way. A group of them, about 11 of them, were from Missouri, and they called themselves the Missouri Wildcats. And they'd been overheard saying in Salt Lake a few weeks prior that they had the gun that shot the guts out of old Joe Smith back in Illinois.
No.
And
which
so
would have been really
there's a lot
situation.
of right, especially right around that time. So there was a lot of resentment towards these people coming in, and they'd already heard word of who they were before they got
And
down.
they were afraid that they may come in and try and wreak havoc here as well. Where they ran here to be safe and settled.
Yeah.
And these people are coming through, so that would raise a lot of emotion.
Yeah, it would have.
You can understand.
Especially the smaller outposts like this, where you're not.
It's
a
funny
big
how
community.
people's words are very powerful
Yeah.
and strong, and that's why words we say that's spelling.
Now,
Right? Magic spell.
careful what you
That's where it
say.
comes from. Absolutely.
according
Not
to
in
the
books.
LDS story, they were also saying that same thing that he was talking about this is the gun that killed
Thank you,
Joseph
Brandon.
Smith.
Thank you, Brandon.
This is the gun that killed Joseph Smith.
Yes.
That actually also happened again in Cedar City, which is only 31 miles away from here. That's where a dispute happened at a general store there. So there probably was some poor choice of words in this case that could have really riled up people.
Stirred up.
Yep.
Well, and
Yep.
the Indians as well, that group of Indians, they were the Paiute
Paiute
Indians,
Yep.
are worried because they are being driven out of where they live.
Yep.
And so everyone's worried.
A lot of things
there's
going
a lot
on.
of emotion
Yep.
going on.
And that's very true. Yep.
So there's 3 stories here.
Yep.
The Baker-Fancher Party was also unaware the U.S. government was sending troops to Utah, believing the Mormons were in rebellion against them. As a result, Brigham Young had declared martial law, instructing the Mormons to prepare for war, and that no supplies or aid be given to migrants passing through. This included the Baker-Fancher wagon train. So when the Baker-Fancher Party entered into Utah, the bishop from Cedar City had been in contact with the prophet Brigham Young already about them coming through.
I have found journals that talk about the fastest man, the fastest horse. So I do know that they were sending telegrams back and forth and communicating, saying, hey, they're coming your way, or this happened.
And they were communicating between Salt Lake City and
those cities.
Mountain Meadows.
Yeah, Mountain Meadows, Cedar City, Nephi, things like that. All of them were communicating back.
Do you know how long that would take?
If someone was very devoted, that had a good horse, I'm thinking 2.5 to 3 days. Someone could be from Cedar City area or Mountain Meadows to Salt Lake City. A strong man who's good at riding.
Not pulling the wagon.
Exactly. And he just has that horse going as much as he can.
That's his job. Get
Yep.
the telegram there as
Yep.
quick as
They
you
should
can.
be able to do it in about, I'd say
And the
3 days.
siege, and the siege was 5 days.
Yes.
So when they were at ground zero, it was 5 days. So there was
Yeah.
plenty of time for someone to get all the way out and all the way back.
Yeah,
But they were camped there longer than that.
they were actually there for about 2 weeks.
They were
Almost
there
2
2 weeks before
Almost
the
2
attacks.
weeks. Yep.
That makes
They're-
me question when they asked the prophet in Salt Lake City what they were supposed to do.
Yeah.
And he sends back a telegram and says, just let them go on their way. If there's a 3-week period.
Yes, there would have been enough time for North Utah and Southern Utah to communicate, not just once, but even a couple times.
Finding that they were unwelcome, the wagon train continued traveling along the California Old Spanish Trail. About halfway to Cedar City, Utah, they camped next to the George A. Smith party from St. George, Utah. Lindsay Urey had family members who were traveling to Salt Lake City with the George A. Smith party.
It is raining like crazy, so anyway, I'm going to let her go ahead and explain about these mountains behind me.
Okay, so right back here is through journals, my family. We had family members that were a part of George A. Smith's party,
Okay?
traveling back up to Salt Lake. And this is where they actually camped out, and they camped next to the Fancher Baker party. And when they were asking for directions, one of the missionaries that they were traveling with back up to the Salt Lake Valley gave them directions to go down to Mountain Meadow. Where
Okay.
ultimately they met there.
So they gave them directions to Mountain Meadow.
They gave them directions just to go down there because they wanted a place that they could feed their cattle, let them
Oh, okay.
graze, and
Okay.
get water and supplies.
And that's where everyone met up down there.
Yes.
Okay, great. Well, this is cool. I wish it wasn't raining so hard, but
It's a little wet.
all right, let's get on the road, guys.
Mountain Meadows offered several springs and plenty of grass for the cattle, and knowing that they had a long trail ahead of them, they decided to camp there and rest and recuperate before heading on to California. All was calm for several days, but on September 7th, the party was attacked by the Mormon-militia men dressed as Native American Paiutes, led by John D. Lee. Native American Paiutes also participated in the 5-day attack. The siege ended on September 11, 1857, when the party ran out of food, water, and munitions. They were approached by John D. Lee carrying a white flag of truce, stating that if they surrendered, they'd be given safe passage to Cedar City to work things out. They were told that a deal had been struck with the Paiute Indians, that if they agreed to be escorted by the Mormon militia back to Cedar City, they would be safe. With their ammunition and supplies running low, they had little choice but to accept the offer.
So there was 5 days of siege,
Correct.
and so the first couple of days were
The first couple days they tried to sneak
surprise
in.
attack,
Yeah.
and then afterwards it was just we're fighting.
It was
you.
more like you already know what we're doing. We're trying to take you down, and so it was different. Yeah.
So we've got nighttime and daytime.
Yep. If you ask me, if you can just even picture it back then too, these attacks that were happening sporadically through those 5 days, I'm sure they didn't sleep. They probably didn't eat. They were scared. They didn't know what was going to happen. So
There's a
yeah,
lot.
I couldn't even imagine what it felt like.
No,
Yeah.
that would be
Yeah.
intense energies.
The party left their supplies and wagons behind as agreed. The wounded, sick, women, and small children were separated and led out of camp first. The men and young teenage boys were forced to walk some distance behind with an armed militiaman walking beside each one of them, supposedly for their protection from the Paiute Indians. About a mile out of their camp, a signal was given, and the men were shot point blank without warning. The women and small children, hearing the shots, ran from their captors and were gunned down as they ran for the trees.
You know, it spread from here. This was ground zero, but they actually marched a mile that way. So there were people killed here. There were the men and boys were killed not too far away from here. Another mile down is where the women were shot and killed. So I mean, you got from here a mile down that way of just death, murder, tragic.
I don't know. Maybe it's just a cultural thing. I mean, I can understand men fighting and killing, but why would you kill the women and the children? I think they wanted them to be quiet and not tell what happened, but I just can't imagine
this. It does mention that they spared only 17 people, and the 17 people were actually children that were under the age of 6, and they believe that that age and younger, the children wouldn't remember the story well enough to tell it later on.
What a tragedy.
Yeah.
At this point, we packed up and drove north about 2.5 miles to the site where the women, children, and the wounded had been massacred.
This is where the women and children heard the gunshots because the men were shot first.
So it was right here?
Yep, there's a monument right there. When they heard the gunshots, they started spreading out more and heading for the hills, and they did have some of the pioneers with them at the time, so the pioneers went running after them, shooting whoever they could. They had to chase after them, and yeah.
That's just sad. Because the women and children had been running toward the trees on the hills to the east at the time of the massacre, I decided the crew and I should run along that same path to see if this action would stir up the emotion and some spirit activity. That's hard. You would just wait for those bullets to hit you in the back. During our investigation on night 1, we used the spirit box to try and communicate with spirit. A spirit box uses radio frequency sweeps from over 250 radio stations, along with white noise, which seem to give spirit the frequency they need to be heard. I'm breathing hard because we just ran. That was terrifying. There's nowhere to hide. That would have been horrific. We are here to tell your story. We know that you were ambushed. Maybe you were one of the ambushers, and you were just following orders, and everybody was afraid. The man who just spoke, are you one of the men that shot these women and children? I know that you thought you were doing what you were supposed to do. Do you feel guilty about what happened here? I'm not sure. If the Indians were involved in that? Good question. This man keeps speaking to us. What is your name? Mike? Mike, thank you for stepping forward. We know there were... Did you hear that? Yeah. Yes. What did you say? Okay. I heard someone back over here. Hello, come and talk to us. I know that you were killed, your children were killed, your sisters, your mothers. How many spirits are there here right now? Did you hear them? A woman said something. What's your name? It sounds like they're having a conversation. Are you looking for each other? Are you looking for the men, your sons? Are you looking? Yes. Mm-hmm. Are we close to someone's body? How many bodies are there here? Three close to us? Yes, there's a lot of emotion involved in this story, but we want to share it rather than the cover up. Help, we will. You know, we want to honor this experience and the posterity, the children who survived this and went on to have families. Let them know that, you know, it's okay. The posterity of the ambushers, that's a lot to carry. I'm so sorry this happened. Oh, I can't even imagine. We packed up and drove about a mile to the men and teenage boy massacre area to continue with night 1 of our investigation. When there's something that is that emotional, that much energy, that much tragedy put into something, it puts an imprint on the spot. It puts an imprint in the space. And so sometimes you'll hear or see things and people will think, oh, there's a ghost or there's something, but it's like a recording.
Yeah.
That keeps playing over and over and over.
Yeah.
And some of these spirits are just, it happens so fast, so quickly, you know, that you wouldn't even really realize, oh, I'm dead. You know, you would just have this terror, and so you would just be trapped within that. That's something I'm trying to figure out is why are they interacting with us?
Yeah. I think by the time they got to this point, they were already suspecting something. I'm guessing their emotions were very high.
Well, and just seeing what's here, you know, you can see that they could run, lay down, try and hide, try and get away, but they're going to be hunted down. At this point, I was beginning to feel the overwhelming heavy emotions associated with this story. The boys and the men were being marched and immediately shot point blank, and so it was so quick. I'm not even sure they even knew they were gone. And while this was happening, I'm sure for a split second, they knew that their women and their children would be killed as well. I bet they hoped they wouldn't. But that's just a different feeling here altogether. This is just, it's giving me a headache. So there's so much shock. It's like shock emotion here. Hello. We've just come from the site where the women and children were massacred. It's such a tragedy, this whole thing. We want to honor you by telling your story. Any of the men or the boys whose spirits are still here, please step forward. Men. What was the teenage boy? Would you like anyone, to find your remains and acknowledge you? Is that a no? Are you okay with where you are? Maybe it's more honoring to leave you where you fell. Yes. How many Indian spirits do we have with us? I heard you, but it wasn't very clear. Can you say how many are here again? 4? Hide. It's like they're running. Run. Maybe the men are still here trying to tell the women to run. Do you know that you're safe now? It's over. You're safe. Are you looking for your children, your mother, your father? Is there someone you can't find? Mother. What's your mother's name? I'm feeling lost anyway. I'm just standing there. You want to go home? Is there something you would like to say before we leave? Bye. All right. During day 2 of our investigation, we used the ovilus to communicate with spirit. The ovilus is a device that measures temperature and electromagnetic fields which correspond with a database of words, which allows spirit to communicate.
Paiute.
Oh my God. At the Men and Boys area, we were setting up our cameras and testing our microphones and equipment and eating lunch. Spirits started communicating with us unexpectedly.
Terror.
Are we recording?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We are back at we're back at the site where the men and the boys were massacred. Is anyone here with us that you would like to story?
Are you outraged by the lies?
All right
Here.
here.
Country.
Mommy.
At this point, spirits stopped communicating with us, and so we set up the cameras out in the Men and Boys area and began our day 2 investigation. So we've come back to talk to you and help you find your mom. Mommy.
Teacher.
Teacher.
I'm sure they have.
Murder.
Is that murder or martyr?
Maybe murder. They had more of a mar instead of a mur.
Martyr.
I wonder if maybe their teachers tried to
Save them.
save them and
I'm
put
sure.
themselves first.
I am sure.
Author.
Wow. That's controversial
That's
right there. There are many questions as to why the Mountain Meadow Massacre actually occurred, but one fact does remain. Many people definitely proffered from the wealthy wagon train and all the valuable livestock.
And we don't know where all the cattle ended up. And
No.
that's a lot of head of horses, then they were highly
They were
prized.
prized horses. I mean, these probably were the best horses that Utah has ever seen. But there are many different accounts of what happened to the horses, what happened to the cows shortly after.
So I'm sure they probably had to deal with the Paiutes
Yep.
and the
Could be.
militia and the Mormons to split some of this stuff
It
up.
could be history, but the Indians didn't have horses. Horses were not native
Right,
to the United States
right,
until people from Spain. The Indians were one of the last people to really have horses when you look at it that way.
Because
When it
they-
comes to the 1800s, they were the last group to get horses. So I mean, those horses would have been valuable to
Oh,
anybody
yes.
who got their hands on them for sure.
Wow.
Anybody want to say anything else before we leave this area? Okay. Well, come with us. We're going to go over to the women's site. Again, we moved our investigation to the Women and Small Children's Massacre area. It was exciting to hear the spirit perspective of what took place during this tragic event. We were hoping to get more of the story at the women's site, along with some sort of closure to our investigation. Last night we ran up here. We ran and we could feel the terror and the emotion of knowing there was nowhere to go. And I cannot even imagine trying to scoop up my children and try and keep them safe.
Supper.
Supper.
15.
15.
15. We know the women ran, the children ran to the trees.
Story.
We'll tell your story here.
Paranormal.
Paranormal. But thank you for letting us share your story, most of all. 4 months after our initial investigation of the Mountain Meadows Massacre, new information came out in the Arkansas and Utah news about the possible location of 2 mass grave sites. We headed back to southern Utah to gather more information. Tim Draper believes that he knows where the original site is and that that is exactly where the bodies are and not in the place where the archaeologist has claimed. So we are going to go and talk to him about that.
After going out and doing our investigation and filming, the more that I learn about it, the more there is to learn.
Yep.
It seems like it goes deeper and deeper.
Very true.
So there's so much out there.
That is very true.
We finished filming, and then on the news, all of a sudden, we hear that there's an archaeologist that has found a different place where he believes they buried the bodies.
Yeah.
So what do you know about that?
Well, it didn't take me more than 2 hours into my investigation the first day for the red flags to pop up.
Oh.
And that's when I just thought, you know, some of the statements that I read from his article that he gave to the news does make sense to me.
As a treasure hunter
Yeah.
and researcher, the red flags came up.
Yeah.
What were those red flags?
For one thing, it's in a ravine. It's in a very deep, wide ravine. What Bassett believes, these mass grave sites were in a ravine anywhere from, it goes from 4 feet deep to 10 or 11 feet deep right there. And that just pulled the
And it's a
flags right
river.
away.
So it's a stream, river,
Exactly.
the water's running through.
Yeah,
And there's a giant pile of rocks.
Yep.
And he believes they put the bodies in the bottom of this river and then piled the rocks on top of it.
Yeah, he says that it does talk about in the military records, which I have read too, where they gathered up the rocks from the nearby area. They stacked them on top of bodies. They used dirt and stuff like that to compact it and make it a better mound.
So, but if it's in a river, then all that would wash away. And maybe they put the pile of rocks there to hold the water in, to
Yep.
keep the water for the farmland that is right there.
That much water can create erosions. They could start washing away the banks. That could have even been something that was put there to try to stop the erosion. There's many different things. I did find a picture of the CCC that was it was given to us by Utah State Historical Society. It does have the date on it, and it says CCC taking a lunch break in Mountain Meadows in 1936. With that picture, it's just a regular picture. You know, some of the guys had their shirts off. You can tell they were working in Mountain Meadows. They didn't just stop off on the side of the road and like, oh, let's have lunch here. They were out there working. And I strongly believe that's why, that if someone really was able to go down there and research more, they'll probably find more than just these 2 rock monuments. I think they're going to find many in these ravines if they search 3-mile radius, let's say.
There could be several locations where there's mass graves.
And that's why I have pictures of these rock monuments. I found 4 now, that I know that are complete different rock cairns that stand anywhere from 3 to 4 foot tall.
Or maybe it's just marking the area. It would be nice that if after this happened, if they gathered everyone up and respectfully buried them
Yeah.
in 2 locations, a women's, children, and
Yeah.
a men's.
Yeah.
If it was that simple.
If it was that simple,
I think
yeah.
that's what this archaeologist is trying to say, that I found the 2 spots, and I don't believe there are just 2 spots. I think there's
don't believe
there's
that.
probably still remnants of
Yeah.
bodies somewhere out
Yeah,
there.
I'm sure. Well, even in 1999, that when I told you guys about the bridge that was constructed there in 1999, they found bodies right there. That wasn't anticipated.
Yeah.
That would have been most likely not ones that the military found. Those were just ones that from when the actual battle happened during those 5 days, there happened to be a couple of people that were killed right there.
So you watch the documentaries and it just makes you cry. It's
Yep.
just so tragic. It's just it's senseless.
It's
It's
real
immigrants
people.
that were just trying to relocate.
Yep.
And halfway to their place, they were all killed,
Yep.
and all of their belongings were taken.
Yeah. But we got to take history for what it is. It was a different time back then. The Mormons went through many different things. Arkansas people went through many different things. And times were just different.